Hello, today we're going to explore a strange story filled with money, conspiracy, love, and revenge, a tale that might send shivers down your spine from the very first details. To better understand this case, let's travel back in time to 2002 and visit the city of Angeles, also known as the City of Angels, in the Philippines. Located in the northern part of the Philippines, Angeles is a small city with a population of over 400,000, yet it boasts a tumultuous history. From being occupied by Japan to hosting the American Clark Air Base, this city has seen its share of ups and downs. The presence of a massive military base like Clark attracted large numbers of soldiers and foreign immigrants, which in turn drew countless Filipinos to the area in search of job opportunities and a new life. Angeles became incredibly prosperous, especially at night. As darkness fell, the streets buzzed with soldiers seeking entertainment and women dressed in glamorous outfits. Even after the U.S. military withdrew, Angeles retained its old traditions. Bars, casinos, and karaoke joints sprang up like mushrooms, transforming the city into Southeast Asia's largest red light district, drawing tourists from all over the world. Because of these traits, Angeles earned the nickname Sin City of the Philippines, a moniker dripping with implication. And it's in this chaotic Sin City where the story we're about to uncover took place. Our main character is Evelyn Davis, a brilliant software engineer. Still young, Stephen had already risen to the position of director at a company in the Philippines, a successful, wealthy man with a bright future ahead. His annual income exceeded £60,000, a dream-worthy figure, making him a true embodiment of a winner. Born on March 27, 1970, in Nottingham, England, Stephen grew up in an ordinary family as the eldest of 3 siblings with 2 younger sisters. His childhood was a bit mischievous, but overall, he was a good kid. The family of 5 lived happily together until tragedy struck when Stephen was 14. A car accident claimed his father's life, and the overwhelming grief changed Stephen overnight. Suddenly, he matured beyond his years. As the only man left in the household, he took on the responsibility of caring for his mother and sisters, becoming diligent and devoted to his family. A few years later, Stephen's mother, Margaret, remarried a man named Alan. Alan brought joy back to the family, getting along well with the children and becoming a new pillar of support. This gave Stephen the freedom to pursue his passion, computers. He spent all his free time tinkering with them, researching, and ignoring friends or outside distractions. Astonishingly, through self-taught efforts, Stephen mastered not only computer hardware, but also programming, a highly promising skill in the 1980s. Thanks to this talent, Stephen quickly landed a stable job, bringing peace of mind to his family. He poured his heart into his work, and by age 21, his outstanding performance caught the eye of a company in Hong Kong. They offered him triple his current salary to join them, a major opportunity and a turning point in his life. Convinced by the generous offer, Stephen also longed to travel and explore the world. His mother, Margaret, didn't want him tied down by family obligations. Though reluctant to let him go, she supported his pursuit of his dreams. Keep this mother in mind. She's a key figure in today's story. Stephen took the job in Hong Kong and worked tirelessly, quickly establishing himself. With a high salary and a smooth career, his life became comfortable. Beyond work, weekend relaxation was a must. At the time, many wealthy individuals flocked to Angeles for fun. As mentioned, the city was famous for its red light district, packed with casinos, bars, karaoke lounges, and other entertainment hubs, all at affordable prices. Stephen and his colleagues often flew to Angeles on weekends to unwind. Besides visiting bars and meeting women, Stephen's favorite pastime was flying. He loved propeller engine planes and even joined an aviation club in Angeles, taking to the skies whenever he had free time. One day, while stepping into a bar, Stephen's eyes were drawn to a youthful, innocent face amid the crowd of women, a gentle-looking girl, exactly his type. Without hesitation, he chose her and spent the night with her. At Angelus's bars back then, girls like her were common. They often came from impoverished, uneducated families, dancing or selling their bodies to survive. At the time, a dancer might earn about £1 a night, while a night of companionship brought in £5. After a few days together, Stephen grew certain she was his soulmate, destined by fate. He generously paid the bar owner £500 to redeem her freedom. Her name was Evelyn, and she hailed from Daram, a poor island in the Philippines with no running water or electricity, where homes were mere bamboo huts. The people there dreamed only of having enough to eat, let alone getting an education. In such poverty, girls from the island grew up hoping to work in bars, dreaming a wealthy man might notice them and change their lives and their families' fates. Evelyn left home for bustling Angeles at just 13, working as a dancer in a bar. Though she earned a meager £1 a day, it was far better than staying home. At least she ate well and dressed nicely, like many other girls. She longed for a rich, blonde, blue-eyed foreigner to whisk her away from her current life. Evelyn felt incredibly lucky to meet Stephen. To her, he was the ideal man, young, handsome, kind, affectionate, and most importantly, wealthy, the man of her dreams. During their time together, Evelyn was obedient and gentle, pleasing Stephen in every way. This delighted him, sparking a wild idea, marrying her. Though aware of her past, he didn't dare tell his parents the full truth about her background, only mentioning she came from a poor village, lacked education, and had worked in a bar. Margaret misunderstood, assuming it was just a regular British pub, and didn't think much of it. In 1997, Margaret and her husband flew to Hong Kong to visit their son, meeting Evelyn, their future daughter-in-law, for the first time. Though Evelyn was polite and well-mannered, after a few days, Margaret felt uneasy about her. She saw a stark contrast between her son, a high-level computer expert, and Evelyn, an illiterate woman with no common ground for conversation, like they lived in two different worlds. Still, unable to change her son's choice, she accepted it and hoped for their happiness. In March 1997, Stephen and Evelyn registered their marriage in Hong Kong. Evelyn was only 17, but borrowed her older sister's ID, falsifying her age as 21. Soon after, she became pregnant and gave birth to their first daughter, Jessica. 2 years later, their son Joshua was born. The family of 4 lived happily together. Not long after Joshua's birth, Stephen decided to relocate to the Philippines, settling in Angeles, the place where he and Evelyn met. Another key reason was that his company's Hong Kong headquarters had opened a branch in Makati, appointing Stephen as its director with a generous salary of at least £5,000 a month, a dream income in the Philippines. He rented a house in an upscale Angeles neighborhood, about 3 hours from the company, for his wife and kids. He gave Evelyn £1,000 a month for expenses, an amount equivalent to 4 average locals' annual income. He also hired a maid, Evelyn's sister, to handle chores and childcare, allowing Evelyn to live comfortably near family. Everything in Stephen's household ran smoothly. Evelyn barely had to lift a finger. In just a few short years, she went from a dancer earning £1 to £5 a day to a wealthy wife with £1,000 monthly spending money. Her family benefited too. Stephen gave her father substantial sums to buy a fishing boat and build the village's first brick house. Thanks to latching onto Stephen, Evelyn and her family's lives transformed dramatically, becoming the envy of their village. For Stephen, life seemed perfect, a beautiful wife, good kids, and a thriving career. But human greed knows no bounds, and a meticulously planned murder plot was quietly targeting him. On July 17, 2002, a typical Wednesday, Stephen and his colleague Michael worked late until 10 p.m. After tidying up and returning to their rented apartment near the company, it was 10:45 p.m. Exhausted, Stephen fell asleep as soon as he lay down. Michael, however, couldn't sleep. His girlfriend was flying in from Hong Kong to meet him. After picking her up from the airport, he returned to the apartment at 1 a.m. They showered, chatted, and prepared for bed. But just as they lay down, Michael's girlfriend sensed something off. She heard footsteps outside and saw flickering light under the door. Michael thought Stephen might be up, but before he could check, the door was kicked open. 3 strangers burst in, one pointing a gun at Michael's head and shouting in Filipino, "Is it him? Is it him?" After Michael's denial, they quickly retreated, then stormed into the next room where Stephen slept. 4 gunshots rang out, followed by hurried footsteps down the stairs. A car engine roared to life, speeding off into the night. It all happened so fast. By the time Michael regained his senses, it was too late. Stephen lay in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. Michael frantically called the police and an ambulance, rushing Stephen to the hospital, but all efforts failed. Michael tried contacting Evelyn, Stephen's wife, but couldn't reach her until 4 months later. He assumed she'd immediately inform Stephen's parents in England, but she didn't. Left with no choice, Michael called Margaret himself. Hearing the devastating news, she collapsed onto the sofa, taking an hour to recover. Heartbroken, Margaret and her husband hastily arranged a flight to the Philippines. 2 days later, at the funeral home, they saw their son again. They asked the Philippine police what happened. Whether out of fear that a British citizen's murder would spark diplomatic issues or for some other reason, the police investigation wrapped up astonishingly fast. Within a day, they concluded it was a business-related killing, suspecting a partner or competitor of Stephen's. Margaret disagreed. If it were business-related, Michael wouldn't have escaped unharmed. She recalled Michael saying the attackers asked, "Is it him?" clearly targeting someone specific. Later, the police changed their story, claiming it was a botched robbery. Still unconvinced, Margaret grew suspicious of Evelyn, her daughter-in-law. "In my life, I've never been so certain," she said. "I know Evelyn was behind this." Her suspicion wasn't just a woman's intuition. It was backed by evidence. First, Evelyn didn't notify the family after Stephen's death. Michael did. That was odd. Second, when Margaret and her husband arrived at the funeral home, Evelyn didn't greet or comfort them, acting like a stranger with no trace of grief. Her first words were, "Have you met Michael? Did he say anything?" She even asked for money, an attitude that raised red flags. More strikingly, Evelyn let slip that the killers were in the house for 20 minutes, a detail Michael might have seen but the police never disclosed. How did she know? Third, months earlier, when visiting Stephen, Margaret had recorded everything with a camcorder, unintentionally capturing Evelyn sneaking off to make phone calls and laughing loudly, behavior that now seemed suspicious. Fourth, before his death, Stephen had told Margaret his marriage was crumbling. Evelyn constantly demanded money, spent recklessly, stole from him, neglected housework, and ignored the kids. Fifth, while sorting Stephen's belongings, Margaret found a pawn shop receipt dated 2 weeks before his death for his wedding ring pawned by Evelyn. Sixth, when Margaret tried paying Evelyn's rent, the landlord revealed Evelyn frequently invited male friends over while Stephen was at work, causing disturbances and nearly getting them evicted. All these clues pointed to something shady about Evelyn. Yet, when Margaret shared her suspicions with the Philippine police, they dismissed her, saying the evidence was insufficient and too speculative to pursue further. With rampant local crime, robberies, thefts, and sexual offenses occurring daily, the police lacked resources to thoroughly investigate every case. Frustrated by their indifference, Margaret turned to the British Embassy in the Philippines, but oddly, they showed little interest either. Perhaps accustomed to the chaos, they advised her to leave the country, warning that intervention was futile. Hearing this, Margaret lost all hope. In a foreign, chaotic city, where even the authorities wouldn't step in, what could a frail woman like her do? Maybe that's why the culprits acted so boldly. But Margaret wasn't just a fragile woman. She was a mother. She couldn't let her son die unjustly. Even if the world turned its back, she resolved to uncover the truth alone, so his soul could rest. Investigating a case in a strange land was obviously difficult and dangerous. Locals warned her that anyone benefiting from Stephen's death would see her as a threat, making her their next target. Undeterred, Margaret transformed from a grieving woman into a vengeful mother, determined to bring the culprits to justice. She bought notebooks, a recorder, and other tools, analyzing the case like a real detective. In her notes, she wrote, "Why was Evelyn so short on money? Where did it go? Who was she secretly calling? A lover? Who were the men she invited over? Were they the killers?" Though her approach was clear, investigating alone was nearly impossible. So she hired a local private detective with a hefty sum to tail Evelyn and dug into her family and friends. Her method was simple: money for information. It was basic but effective. Stephen's colleagues revealed escalating tensions between him and Evelyn. Their relationship, once good, had soured recently. Evelyn had a lover, constantly demanded money, spent wildly, and stole, neglecting even the kids. Once, when Stephen took Jessica to school, he discovered she wasn't enrolled. Evelyn had squandered the tuition money. He confronted her, offering two choices: end the affair and save their marriage by going to college or getting a job. Used to an easy life, Evelyn refused both. Finally, Stephen cut her allowance, a risky move. Colleagues warned him she might act recklessly, but he remained calm. Their conflicts worsened, irreconcilable, and Stephen began staying at an apartment near work, frequenting bars and rarely coming home. Another key clue: Evelyn was close with a man named Arnold, often seen embracing him, likely her lover. After weeks of surveillance, the detective found two men sneaking into Evelyn's home. One was Arnold. With clear photos in hand, the police acted swiftly, arresting Arnold, a security guard, and his friend Alexander. Ironically, due to budget constraints, Margaret had to cover their travel and gas costs from Makati to Angeles for the arrests. At the station, Michael instantly recognized them as the attackers from that night. With Michael's testimony on August 16, 2002, Arnold and Alexander were charged with murder. It seemed the case was closed with two killers caught, but it wasn't that simple. A kind officer told Margaret, "Marrying a Filipina means marrying her whole family. If things go wrong, that sweet kitten can turn into a tiger. Be careful." The embassy issued a final warning: leave the Philippines or face retaliation. They'd learned the suspects, former Christian police officers, might be protected by corrupt colleagues and tied to local gangs who could target Margaret. If she were killed, the case would collapse. After weighing her options, Margaret refused to give up, but worried for her grandchildren's safety. While agreeing to return home per the embassy's advice, she negotiated with Evelyn, offering money to let Jessica vacation with her for a week. Greedy, Evelyn handed over Jessica's passport. In September 2002, after over a month of grief and fear, Margaret and her husband left the pain-ridden city, safely returning to England with Jessica. Though two killers were caught, Margaret didn't stop. A third was still at large, and she believed the mastermind remained free. She couldn't return to the Philippines. The embassy warned it'd endanger her life and barred her re-entry. Plus, taking Jessica under the guise of a vacation had infuriated Evelyn, who sued her for kidnapping. Returning risked arrest upon landing. Still, Margaret thought she could act from afar. She emailed British MPs, lawyers in both countries, the embassy, and anyone she could think of, hoping to pressure Philippine police into a thorough investigation. She kept funding the detective and contacting Evelyn's circle. When police action was needed, she covered costs. Expensive, but she didn't care, even mortgaging her home. She also wanted Joshua in England. When Evelyn learned this, she raged, "You took my daughter, now my son too?" Through an intermediary, she threatened, "Joshua will meet Stephen before he meets you," a clear threat that heightened Margaret's fears for him. She sought updates on Joshua through Evelyn's relatives and friends. Why did they help? Money, yes, but also resentment. Evelyn's newfound wealth made her arrogant, treating her poor kin poorly, earning their hatred. Eventually, a relative revealed Joshua was on Durham with Evelyn's parents, who were fed up with her after losing Stephen, their money printer. Margaret paid £3,000 plus to bring Joshua to England. His grandparents, unable to care for him well, agreed. After complex logistics, Joshua arrived, malnourished, with ankle scars from being tied to prevent escape. Months later, Evelyn's aunt named the third killer, Robin Butus, husband of Evelyn's sister Gina. He'd fled, evading police. On June 14, 2003, 11 months after the murder, Robin was caught. He agreed to testify for a lighter sentence, revealing everything. He admitted aiding Stephen's murder, led the killers to the house, provided keys, and kept watch. Evelyn, the mastermind, warned them to stay silent, all for money. She believed Stephen's wealth, property and insurance in England, would make her rich if he died. Shocked, police acted. In November 2003, with Robin's testimony, Arnold and Alexander faced trial after 14 months in custody. Gina, Robin's wife and Evelyn's sister, testified too, confirming Evelyn's affair with Arnold. Evelyn had bought him a motorbike and rented him a house, promising freedom together post-murder with Stephen's money. Matching Robin's account, Arnold and Alexander got 30 years without parole and a 50,000 peso fine for Stephen's kids. Robin, for testifying, was spared prosecution. Only Evelyn remained at large. A warrant was issued, but finding her in a nation of 7,000-plus islands, sans surveillance then, was tough. She could hide on any remote island. Months passed with no trace. The police seemed indifferent. Missing suspects were routine. But Margaret couldn't rest with her son's killer free. On February 17, 2014, at 6:30 p.m., Evelyn was found in a remote Zambales village, hiding at a friend's. Arrested and taken to Makati, she claimed innocence, insisting she wasn't hiding and Stephen's death was unrelated to her. By then, Evelyn was shunned. Even her kin felt ashamed of a husband killer. Only her father visited her in jail. No one else cared. At trial, she denied guilt, claiming an alibi, but offering no witnesses. Police had 14 witnesses and solid arguments. On November 25, 2014, Margaret and her husband returned to the Philippines for the verdict. In a cramped Manila courtroom, Evelyn entered calmly, ignoring them. When sentenced to 45 years without parole for murder, her face froze in shock. Margaret never wanted Evelyn executed. She was satisfied with this outcome. Afterward, she requested a meeting. Evelyn, cold and wearing sunglasses, didn't stand. Asked about her kids, she said she missed them, her face emotionless. Margaret left her an album of the kids' drawings and promised updates, but that was it, hoping Evelyn would reflect in prison. Evelyn had risen from rags to riches, but squandered her hard-earned happiness. Greed led her to crime and a heavy price. Her story is a profound lesson on greed's consequences. Margaret believed Evelyn never loved Stephen, only his money. To her, wealth trumped all, a dangerous mindset willing to kill for selfish gain. Margaret's cross-border quest for justice gained wide attention, her story lauded in papers as a brave, resilient mother. Without her persistence, the case might have faded, killers free. The 14 witnesses and informants faced threats, some relocated multiple times, hinting at the culprit's power. Thankfully, global attention forced police to act fairly. From Stephen's murder to Evelyn's sentencing, Margaret endured 2.5 agonizing years, sleepless, spending nearly all she had, her home mortgaged twice. She wrote, "For the love of my son," detailing her fight for justice. "People praise us for not giving up," she said, "but I just did what any mother would. It was a long journey for justice. I fulfilled my duty. Now my son can rest." That's today's story. See you in the next one. Goodbye.